Welcome to the presentation on effective language for workplace discussions. In this session, you'll learn to participate actively and professionally, enhancing your English for business communication. Our learning objectives include using appropriate language for workplace discussions, asking and expressing opinions clearly, leading and managing group discussions, handling interruptions and disagreements politely, and providing persuasive recommendations and solutions. When asking for opinions, you can use expressions like, "What's your take on this? How do you feel about? Would you agree that? Or do you have any thoughts on this issue?" For example, Alex might say, "Before we finalize the proposal, what's your take on the pricing strategy, Navila?" And Navila might respond, "Personally, I think it's a bit high for the target market." When expressing opinions, useful expressions include, "In my opinion, I believe that. From my perspective, and it seems to me that." For instance, John might say, "In my opinion, extending the deadline might affect our client's trust." Sue could then respond, "I see your point, but it could also improve the quality of our work." When responding to opinions, you can use expressions like, "That's a valid point. I hadn't thought of it that way. I see what you mean, but," or "I respectfully disagree." For example, Ravi might say, "I think we should outsource the design." Emma could reply, "That's a valid point, but it might cost more in the long run." When leading discussions, consider using expressions such as, "Let's start by discussing." "Can we move on to?" "Let's hear from everyone." Or, "Let's summarize what we've covered." For example, Li Wei might say, "Let's begin by identifying the root of the problem. Then we'll brainstorm possible solutions." When solving problems, useful expressions include, one possible solution could be, "What if we tried? Let's consider an alternative approach," and the issue might be caused by. For example, Tina might say, "We're behind schedule. One possible solution could be assigning extra manpower to the testing team." When making decisions, you can use expressions like, "Let's go with option A. It seems we're all in agreement. Shall we vote on it?" Or, "We've weighed the pros and cons. I suggest." For example, Adam might say, "Since both teams prefer plan B, let's proceed with that." When seeking and giving clarification, you can ask, "Could you explain what you meant by? Sorry, could you clarify that?" Or, "I'm not sure I follow." When giving clarification, use phrases like, "What I meant was, to clarify," or "Let me rephrase that." For instance, Sarah might ask, "Sorry, could you clarify what you meant by a rolling deadline?" Liam could respond, "Sure. I meant that the timeline is flexible and not fixed." When interrupting politely, use expressions such as, "Sorry to interrupt, but if I could just add something," or "Can I quickly jump in here?" For example, Mia might say, "Sorry to interrupt, but I think this connects to what John said earlier." When giving persuasive recommendations, use expressions like, "I strongly recommend that we," "It would be beneficial to," "This approach will help us to," or "Based on the data, we should." For example, Jake might say, "Based on last quarter's sales, I strongly recommend launching the product in Q2. Now, let's do a group discussion practice activity. Form groups of 4. Choose a scenario such as a product launch, customer complaint, or deadline delay. Discuss the issue using at least 5 of today's expressions. Present your solution and how the decision was made. In recap, remember to use polite, clear expressions, respect different opinions, lead and participate actively, clarify, and persuade professionally.